Welcome to Below the Line, where we talk about working in Hollywood from the crew perspective. My name is Skid. I'm a former assistant director and your host. Today, we're talking about The 40-Year-Old Version, a 2020 Sundance winner that was acquired by Netflix and released a few weeks ago. At Rotten Tomatoes, the tomato meter score is 98%, and the critics' consensus reads, "The 40-Year-Old Version opens a compelling window into the ebbs and flows of the artist's life," and announces writer-director star Radha Blank as a major filmmaking talent with her feature debut. I really enjoyed this, and if you haven't seen it, I recommend you pause the podcast and come back to us after, because today's conversation might contain spoilers. My guest for that conversation is the film's cinematographer, Eric Branco. Eric, welcome to Below the Line.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Eric, I'm glad you're here as well. So before we dive into the specifics of the film, and there's a lot of very interesting cinematography questions specifically here, tell us first a little bit about your early career.
Yeah, I think I got into film from a funny angle. I started out I grew up in New York City, and kind of always knew I wanted to do something related to storytelling and film or theater or what have you. And so as a kid, I started acting in off-Broadway plays and off-Broadway plays. I think just to kind of be closer to the world and feel like I was, a little more involved in something bigger. That kind of led to really falling in love with movies and wanting to make my own films. So kind of in high school, I thought my path was going to be kind of writer, director, actor in the kind of Spike Lee, Woody Allen, vein of the New York filmmakers I knew at the time. And when I started making short films with my friends, kind of quickly realized that there was no one to hold the camera. So I stepped back from acting to shoot the movies that we were making, and then totally fell in love with cinematography and telling a story visually.
Now, on IMDb, you have a ton of shorts credited. It looks like that even as you've done feature work over your career, you're continuing to do short films and other projects. What's the context of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just love, telling stories and doing good work. And so if it's a short film that speaks to me, I'm still going to do it. I'm not I'm not above doing short films, I guess I'll say. And there are some short films that I absolutely love, some directors I've been working with, such as like Marshall Tyler and Alfonso Johnson, who, we've been together for a couple of years doing shorts, and they all have features in the works. So it's a good way to meet people and continue relationships kind of even in between the bigger projects.
Now, on those bigger projects, I noticed that you've got a number of films where you collaborate with writer-directors, which is often the idea that someone has their own vision for something coming together. Is that something you gravitate towards, or that's just how it's gone coincidentally? Talk to me a little bit more about the larger projects.
Yeah, I mean, I think even when I say larger projects, I'm still speaking about kind of larger indies, and usually independent films are kind of heralded by one voice. So usually it is a writer director that kind of forces the film into existence. It's not the kind. Most indies are not the kinds of movies where there's a separate writer and then they bring in somebody to direct. Everybody's kind of taking a chance on trying to tell one story.
And it looks like that led up to another well-recognized film, Clemency, which was the 2019 Grand Jury Prize winner at Sundance. How did that come together?
That came together through a short film. I reconnected with a friend from high school a couple years back, who just through our talking said, "Oh, there's someone I should put you in touch with." A mutual friend of ours, Chinoya Chukwu, who she was looking for a DP for a short film she was doing at the time. So we ended up kind of hitting it off and collaborating on this short film, A Long Walk, which we shot in Philly in 2013, and just had a great time. Just really, really, I think, we're speaking the same language and the same things resonated with us. And so we kind of shortly after wrapping that short, I got a message from her saying, "Hey, listen, I'm working on a feature script. Can I send it to you when I'm done?" I was like, "Of course." So I think a couple months after that was the first draft of Clemency, probably like early 2014, maybe mid 2014. And it was just the kind of project that took, 4 or 5 years to get off the ground. It was kind of like every year that we'd have the financing and then it would fall through, and then we'd get the financing back and then it would fall through, and then we'd cast an actor and they would fall out. And really, in the kind of winter of 2018, all the puzzle pieces fit together perfectly. Alfre Woodard signed on. Once she was involved, the financiers were a little more willing to stick their neck out, and so we shot in over 17 days in early 2018.
Oh, wow.
And then a year later, premiered at Sundance, which was amazing.
Well, from what I've extrapolated on my own research, it sounds like your collaboration with Radha Blank for the 40-year-old version was on a bit tighter of a schedule. Tell me a little bit more about how you got involved with this project, where it was when you came in, and then what you brought to it.
I think most indies kind of have similar evolutions. This project was, I think, supposed to be a web series at first. That fell apart. Then it was going to be a feature that they were going to shoot the year before we did. That fell apart. And so I think crew gets shuffled, people become unavailable. And so they were looking for a new DP. And Radha and I have known each other for a couple of years. I think, just from kind of the film festival circuit and just kind of being people that moved in the same circles a little bit. And I had shot a short film called Cap, which had won the American Black Film Festival the summer prior. And so I had some black and white work, that was out there and available. And and we had a ton of mutual friends. And so they reached out, her team reached out to me, met Radha in a coffee shop. We talked for like 2 hours straight. And shortly thereafter, they offered me the film.
Now, so that's interesting. So in talking about the black and white, this is a film then where that was part of her vision. And so she saw your other work in the black and white space. Because that's one of the most striking things about the film is that, yep, it's modern film, modern day, yet filmed primarily in black and white. So
yeah,
again, this sort of idea around it. Tell me more.
I think, shooting in black and white is such a bold choice. And a choice that is going to kind of follow the movie through the movie's lifespan. That I would be surprised if there are any movies out there that the idea to film in black and white came from the DP. I think that's such kind of a creative, that choice is kind of in the DNA of the film. So I would imagine that most black and white films, that idea is part and parcel with the entire, concept of the film from the start. But that said, I mean, I shoot tons and tons and tons of stills in black and white. I love, shooting in black and white and only working in contrast and kind of seeing the world that way is something that I love. And so when the opportunity presented itself to do a feature film in black and white, especially a feature film in black and white shot in New York, in my hometown, I jumped at that immediately.
New York is your hometown, but you're not exclusively based in New York. You're filming on both coasts.
Yeah, so I moved to LA a couple of years ago. I moved to LA actually right before we shot Clemency. And then since then I've just been bouncing back and forth and all over the place and traveling the world. But yeah, I'm in New York right now for a show I'm doing. So yeah, I'm kind of wherever there's an airport, you'll find me.
And so, okay. So on the filming itself then, so there's decisions made ahead of time to be black and white. And what was the intent, as you understand it, behind wanting to do this film in black and white so much that they're trying to find people with that expertise to work in the space rather than the other way around?
Primarily filming in black and white. I mean, just a couple things. Filming in black and white, I think really kind of strips away some of the visual flourish and distraction and really makes people hone in and focus on the story, which I think was important to Radha. And I think also, I think kind of black film as a larger subset of filmmaking really came to prevalence once color film had already kind of became the go-to medium for shooting a feature. So I think it was an opportunity to kind of do an indie film that would present the black experience, especially in New York, kind of in a way that we haven't really had opportunities to see. black film doesn't have a French New Wave. It doesn't have, the stories kind of created and told and starring black actors never really had their moment to shine in black and white. So it was a chance to kind of go back and kind of correct that a little bit as well.
So pushing it to black and white is something that could have been done in post, but clearly you guys made the decision ahead of time that you were going to capture in black and white. Tell me a little bit more about the challenges and the decision making behind that.
I think, Radha and I always intended to capture in black and white rather than just convert it later. I think it's a came down to me for a film stock choice. There have been a lot of beautiful films shot in color on color stock that you then just desaturate and they look beautiful. But I think there's something magical to kind of seeing that, having that silver on the negative that the black and white gives you. And that's really how I saw the film. One kind of our primary challenge with shooting black and white was that Kodak was the only lab in New York at the time, kind of developing daily and kind of at the scale that we needed, and they were wrapped up with Spielberg's West Side Story remake, and so they did not have the capacity to convert a bath to black and white for us. So shooting black and white meant that we were going to have to ship our film somewhere else, and which in turn meant that we would have, I think it was like a 4-day turnaround between shooting and seeing dailies. So there was some early discussion from producers and financiers about if that was going to be okay. And, thankfully Rod really pushed to comfort them and make that part of the process. So we were able to shoot on black and white.
Eric, let's take a moment on that, because in the day of video playback, where you can barely do a take of a scene without watching it right away on a modern set, the idea of waiting 4 days to see what you've actually shot, I am surprised that was approved. I mean, that's a real dedication to the creative vision of it.
Well, yes, it was approved. That said, it was a very interesting workflow because we were recording our video feed. So the first assembly of the film was actually made using recorded video taps.
Okay.
And then that was then replaced with our kind of like one light scan in the assembly, and then that was replaced with a nice 2K scan in the assembly, and then that was eventually replaced with a 4K scan right after picture was locked, right before we did color. So
so you're able to do the work, so you can get feedback and idea from a directing and performance perspective, and then we capture it.
Yeah.
But how it's actually going to come together, what's actually on the film, you have to wait for it to make the turnaround.
Yeah, it took a couple of days to get the negatives back, and then get those scanned. But yeah, I mean, we were able to watch dailies instantly. We were able to watch takes instantly on set using video playback, just not at the quality that maybe you'd be used to, say, working in kind of video now.
Got it. Okay, well, whew, that's a relief, and I'm sure that was a relief for your other departments that wanted to see what was going on as well.
Yeah, definitely.
But tell me a little bit about collaborating with other departments in this idea of black and white, where what you capture in the end is not going to have the full color structure of normal filming.
Yeah, I mean, it was about collaboration between departments was I can kind of go through each department a little bit,
yeah, please do. Yeah. Like, what were some of the specific challenges that people brought to you, or vice versa?
I mean, in my own head, challenges became how do you with lighting determine a time of day without color? It's the kind of thing where we're also used to, if it says late afternoon, that means it's going to be orange light streaming in the windows. And that sells what time of day it is. If it's dawn, it's going to be soft blue light filling the room, because that's what dawn looks like. But it became this kind of thing of like, okay, how do we make dawn without a color? So, that's an interesting challenge. Kind of the whole first couple minutes of the movie take place in Radha's apartment, kind of in a dawn time of day. And it was really about kind of just keeping exposure down, keeping light very soft and indirect, and making it clearly there was no kind of sun coming into her apartment windows, and that's kind of how we got around that. But yeah, I mean, definitely kind of lighting without color is an interesting challenge. Not so much aesthetically, just in terms of storytelling and structurally, and what time, so much of our world is seen in color. What time of day is it? Where are we? What is this? Color is a big part of all of that. So finding interesting and creative ways to get around that was a challenge. But then also other things like costuming and production design, where, there were a couple times where Peter Kim, who plays Archie, Radha's kind of best friend in the movie, and agent, would come to set looking phenomenal in kind of a multicolor suit, in like a kind of a bluish blazer, a pink shirt, and a khaki pair of pants. But then he gets in front of the camera and it's just all the same shade of gray. So it was kind of,
right.
Costuming became more about pattern and texture and contrast, and less about kind of pleasing color. So, a lot of the costumes to the eye on set were a little loud and garish. Things you would never actually dress people in. But on black and white, they look elegant and amazing, and deep and textured and all that stuff.
Now, that's interesting. You mentioned about like showing up on set, and maybe there's some hyperbole there, but these folks in the pre-planning must have also known some of the limitations. Your costume folks, your set designers, recognizing how these things are going to play out. Although, like that issue of how we look to color for cues, it's not self-evident, right? And that when you take color away, the absence of it's like going blind on some level, and people don't necessarily anticipate that in advance.
Yeah, I mean, everybody, any picture, so much of making a movie these days is, iPhone pictures and iPhone pictures or whatever else bounced all around between departments, between people working, so early on the kind of mandate went out, any picture sent, it should be in black and white. Please don't send a color of a red wall, because that's not, you know what I mean? That's
right.
It's not going to help anybody to see that. So, there's as a film that takes place in the theater, there were a lot of of kind of theatrical play posters, flyers, those kinds of things. Those were all printed in black and white, because I think early on in testing, I think something was printed in black text on a red background, which the eye looked great. You could easily discern what it was, but then we filmed it and it was like dark gray on darker gray, which is, that kind of thing. We did, and we also did a ton of tests on our actual stock with things like fabric for costuming, for production design. A lot of things were actually filmed in black and on the actual stock, because even just changing your color sensor, be that an iPhone or a digital camera or whatever it is, desaturating a color image doesn't quite give you the same tones that a true black and white film stock is going to give you. So I tried to do my best to give everybody a couple hours of testing with the actual stock.
Right. What they'd actually see, and to get some kind of idea about how things were gonna play out, because this isn't something that you can just reshoot entire scenes when you're working on this. I imagine you guys were budgeted like an indie film, right?
Yeah. I mean, certainly, if money was going to be spent reshooting, it was not going to be because we just didn't foresee something and messed it up. And at that point, the person gets replaced, not the scene.
Well, let's talk then about how a crew for something like this comes together. There's a lot of handheld work in it. Are you doing your own handheld work, or do you have a separate operator?
We had operators on set, kind of, just with the union rules of shooting a movie, you have to have an operator. But I think part of the reason I was hired was because of my handheld work. And so I probably operated, 90% of the movie myself. So, and then, there were some scenes where operator stepped in. I think there were 2 days I was actually really sick. So I had to bow out and sit in the corner by the monitor. But for the most part, yeah, it was me operating.
And how large was your camera crew in the sense when you're filming black and white, are you looking at a larger crew and more equipment, or in fact, were you streamlined on that side as well?
I mean, mainly had a four-person crew every day. We had an operator, our first AC, Xian Shen. We had a second AC, Jonathan Zhang. And we had a loader, Angela Kovu, who that was kind of our crew. But even if it was color or if it was digital, it would still be the same size. We'd have a first, a second, and instead of a loader, maybe a DIT. But ultimately, kind of they're filling the same position. So camera crew was pretty small. Grip and electric, we had, I think it was maybe 4 and 4.
Okay.
So I had actually, no, you know what? It was 3 and 3. I think production budgeted for 4 and 4. And I don't know how kind of technically you want me to get it. You know what I mean?
I'm curious about what kind of crew size you had. Yeah. So if you get too technical, I'll start to glaze over and I'll let you know, Eric. But in the meantime, tell us more about who was there and how it broke out.
Yeah. So, I mean, production, I think budgeted for 4 and 4. So meaning, a gaffer, a grip, and then 3 under them on the electric side and 3 under them on the grip side. I think I asked for, and then they had budgeted extra man days on top of that because we had some bigger things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I adjusted those resources a little bit to, I think we carried at the end of the day 3 and 3 on both sides, and I put that extra person on either department into man days.
Okay.
So, which turned into probably, it just allowed us to play more. So on grip heavier days, we might have 5 on grip side and 3 on electric. And then on electric heavier days, we might have 5 on electric and 3 on grip. But our standard crew was 3 and 3 every day. And led by a gaffer, Tyler Harmon Townsend, and a key grip, Scott D'Angelo.
And so were you guys filming on location every day, or was there some stage work for some of the set pieces? Or
there was we had one stage day. Which was a necessity in order to get the New York production tax credit.
Interesting.
You have to shoot states. I guess one stage day, because that's what we did in order to qualify for the tax credits in New York. So we did actually all the Queen of the Ring boxing scene was our stage day, which was kind of a daylight photo studio that we only used at night, and I lit up the windows to kind of get a sense of that kind of. It was like almost a big loft up in the Bronx. So our production designer built a boxing ring in the stage, and made it work.
And then and how long was the shoot then on this one?
This was 20 days we shot.
Week after week, or did you guys have to take breaks in the middle?
No, yeah, it was a quick 4 week. I think it was 4 weeks prep and 4 week shoot. This was a 20-day shoot, and I think we had a day of B-roll after that, and I think we had a day of pickups maybe like 2 months later. But these were all kind of skeleton, like skeleton crew, just like kind of pickup days. But for the most part, with everybody on set, it was 20 days. There's
a series of scenes that are shot in color, which you might describe them better than I will. But basically, it's the story within the story, but it looks like all of that could be done on a single day. Is that the case? Or was that pickup and talked a little about the decision about, we're going to do some color here. One, about the thoughts behind it. And then, if I haven't tagged too many questions onto this, sort of how then your caption of that is different than the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it was kind of decided everything that took place in Radha's head was going to be in color, which, if you haven't seen the movie, there's just a couple cutaways or things where she's thinking about what the play is going to be like that she's writing, or there's one in particular where she thinks about how her manager got her a job. These are all in color. Originally, we wanted to shoot them on 16 mil, but couldn't afford to carry a whole another camera package and lens set. So we actually came up with the idea we in the final cropped it down to what a 16 mil frame would be. On 35. So we, on set, we framed it for, I think we might have even put in a 16 mil ground glass. So we had 16 mil frame lines, and it's about half the size of the full 35 mil frame. But by doing that, hopefully everything's in there and the grain structure is what it would be on 16 and all that stuff. So interesting tidbit. That was all shot MOS, meaning we were not recording sound because the idea was always going to be that Radha was going to be the voice of all these characters. So we actually shot that with our backs to the boxing ring as they were building it for our night work. That's what we were shooting
Oh,
in the
really?
day to kind of maximize time. So,
But did it out on the stage as well, your one stage day, and you went in
our
and
one
picked those
stage
things
day
up.
was half. We built a brought in some seamless paper, and then the lighting crew was rigging the overheads behind us, and they were building the boxing room behind us and everything. So we kind of built a little blackout tent and shot this stuff.
And since you're not capturing any sound on it anyway, then you're okay with all the
Yeah, you
construction.
don't
You
hear
don't have to lock
all
everything
the
down.
drills and hammers going on behind us.
Well, talk to me more about the atmosphere on set in general. These indie films can be a grind, or things can really come together. What was it like on this set?
It was a mix. I mean, it's a comedy, so there were definitely moments of lightness on set, but at the same time, I think it was a really ambitious film for the amount of money we had and the amount of time we had. And so there were days that went very long. There were days where we were kind of all in it together. You know what I mean? It was, I think like most films, it's a mix.
But this film comes together and then goes to Sundance. So, were you able to attend yourself the festival last January?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to have a couple things in Sundance over the last few years, so it's kind of become a family tradition of we drive out, stop in Vegas, continue on to Sundance, kind of make it a road trip. I go with my wife, my daughter every year.
Okay.
So my daughter gets to go sledding and stuff while I'm doing interviews and going to the premiere and all that stuff. So yeah, we have fun. But it's always, Sundance is always amazing. It's kind of like a family reunion.
Well, and so what was it like for this film? Could you get a sense that it was going to win an award? I mean, how does it feel? Like, there's so many films, and I just can't imagine what the process is like. And never having actually been myself, talk a little bit about what it's like to be there as a filmmaker with films in the competition.
It's interesting. I had the first thing I had at Sundance was a anthology featured horror film called VHS, which played at Sundance, and I could not afford to go with it, so I didn't go. The second thing I had at Sundance was a short film in competition called Night Shift, also directed by Marshall Tyler, and it was interesting. It's kind of Sundance, and I think all these festivals can be very kind of like cliquey, and there's definitely people are measuring you based on the kind of badge you have around your neck before they know you. So definitely the difference between having a short film at Sundance versus then having a feature in competition at Sundance versus then having a feature in competition at Sundance and having won the grand jury prize the previous year. I think every year the meals get a little better. I get into better parties. It's a lot of that stuff.
If you're a previous winner, do you get a special badge for that? Do they put a little tag on your badge that says you won before? At this point, people know.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, also I think just my comfort level at Sundance has changed over the last couple of years. It's like, now. I think I'm still kind of a young man and hopefully young in my filmmaking career, but it's like now there are people at Sundance who I see them coming up behind me, and I can't wait for them to have a feature in competition. It's that kind of thing where there are people. I feel like I'm not kind of like the newbie anymore at the festival. If that makes sense, which is nice.
And was there something unique about this film that was going to capture this kind of attention, or is there just a general atmosphere at Sundance that you really don't know what's going to come out on the winning side of things?
I have never been more surprised in my life than I was when Clemency won Sundance. You don't get any sense. When you go to the premiere, the judges kind of come in, and they're usually celebrities of some fashion. They're kind of always kind of like ushered in quietly after right as the lights go down. And then when the lights come up, they're gone. They don't stay for the Q&A, they keep it very, very separate. So, you really don't get a sense of how they feel or how anyone's reacting to anything or any of that until they call the name, at the award ceremony.
Well, they'll get some sense of the audience reaction because they are watching the film with a full house, but
Yeah,
they're not there for the
every
Q&A or any detail or diving any
no,
deeper. The film's got to stand on its
no.
own.
Yeah, they really. I mean, the film. I mean, that's something I will say. The film does really stand on its own. I think with the jurors, which is nice. I mean, this year, Sundance is I think very different. If anybody's seen Clemency, it is a real downer. So it's like the Q&As for 40 are always like much livelier than standing up. When the lights go down after Clemency, there's always like a minute of silence, and then people are still wiping away their sniffles during the Q&A. So there's definitely a good experience to kind of come back with something that's. I mean, it's still I think hopefully a powerful film, but definitely people come away from it feeling good and feeling inspired. In a way that a lot of my other work has not kind of I think had that effect on people.
Well, I mean, if you've had films that have won awards now 2 years in a row, Eric, I mean, do you feel pressure to find films that are going to play well at Sundance, or what's your next steps then, having been affiliated with a couple of award-winning films in a row?
I mean, the next step is that hopefully somebody picks me up and actually pays me a check to make a movie. That's the dream. Which I'm in New York. I'm shooting I'm in pre-production right now, about to start shooting an HBO Max TV series. So this is fun. This is kind of my first foray into TV. It's not a pilot. So this is exciting. This is gonna be the first year in a while that I haven't had anything at Sundance. So I might be moving into the studio network side of things a little bit.
Well, Eric, these are challenging times now under COVID. It'll be interesting to see what Sundance actually does come January for filming in for the 2021 competition. But also now that you're working in New York on a television show, I know a lot of films standing up, but a lot of different restrictions, a lot of other challenges just in getting the work done these days.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't, I know Sundance is trying to have some in-person festival in some capacity, but I'm certainly not at a place personally where I'm going to go sit in a theater with people I don't know. So, I mean, I imagine it's definitely a challenge for them to try and get that off the ground. And on the flip side, I feel like being on a movie set or TV show set is the safest place you could be right now. I'm getting texted 3 times a week. Everyone else on the production, including our drivers and everybody's getting tested 3 times a week. So, not that testing is the end all be all, but we're all getting tested. In addition, we're all wearing masks. In addition, we're all distancing. In addition, the offices and sets and equipment is all being sanitized multiple times a day. So, I feel like if I needed to be anywhere, I'd probably choose to be on a film set.
Well, appreciate that, Eric, and appreciate you taking the time today to come talk about the 40-year-old version. Once again, folks, if you went ahead and listened without watching the film, that's okay. Go watch the movie. It's well worth your time. Eric, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
Listeners, your feedback is always welcome. You can send email comments to skid, S-K-I-D, at belowtheline.biz. That's B-I-Z. Please rate us wherever you get your podcast and help us reach new listeners. And new listeners, most of our material is evergreen, so feel free to peruse our past seasons. Maybe another episode will catch your eye. If you're on Facebook, you can find photos and other behind-the-scenes materials at Podcast Below the Line. And finally, you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram. It's at Pod Below the Line. Thanks to Curtis Five for our music and John Wan for our logo. The logo is available on t-shirts, mugs, and stickers at redbubble.com. Thanks again for listening. Be safe out there.